Hi there, welcome to The Leading Edge. Thank you so much for joining us here this week. I'm Jeff Smith. You know how when you're a kid and you knew a birthday was coming up or maybe Christmas and you couldn't wait to open that gift or see who was going to show up at the party? Well, this has been one of those shows for me. I've been so looking forward to having my guests on here. I'll tell you what, we have been very lucky over the last few weeks to interview a lot of people with passion and purpose. Their drive and vision, not only admirable, but it's also the stuff of which there is reason to be optimistic. And Midstory continues that wave. The vision for Midstory, which you're going to hear today, happened well before the pandemic ever hit. But what was it that, I guess, convinced a successful East Coast crew to pull up its stakes and set its sights back on the Glass City, telling the stories that are so important to the Midwest? We're about to find out. Let's introduce my guests here from Midstory. We've got Logan Sander and Samuel Chang, both co-founders of this effort. Interactive website, storytelling output. How do you label what Midstory is? Samuel, start us off.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having us here, Jeff. Midstory really is an educational multimedia storytelling organization. And what we call ourselves is a media think hub. So we adopt some nonprofit models from the think tank model, which is really research and storytelling, and some public media, and we kind of blend it all together, information to really guide our community and progress Midwest narratives. And there's really three major branches of Midstory, as we call it. The first is our public media, the second, our solutions-oriented research, and the third, which is something really dear and near to our hearts, is serving young people, both here in the region and elsewhere across the United States, to get them to be involved in this storytelling mission, telling stories and narratives across the Midwest, and hopefully for them to fall in love with this region as well.
You know, I talked about pulling up roots on the East Coast, but the roots started here in Northwest Ohio. Logan, you guys both products of local high schools, and I guess let's go to the backstory of starting all of this. You both products of Sylvania Southview High School, ended up at Princeton University. So you get your education and all of a sudden, my gosh, how does this start noodling around?
Yeah, it's a really interesting story. I mean, of course, all of us grew up here in the Midwest, the co-founders. Three of us grew up in Toledo. So I was born and raised here, spent my entire childhood here. Hadn't really left a ton until I went off for college. Of course, that was a sort of cultural shock in and of itself. Going off to a place like Princeton, having the privilege to have that kind of education. We all sort of at some point came to a crossroads in our life. So of course Sam was working at a prison education nonprofit out in Boston. My other colleagues were working in architecture and bioengineering. I was sort of set on a journalism track, and I think at that point in time in 2018, we sort of came to this crossroads where we were asking ourselves, where can we make the most impact with everything we've been given? I mean, we were really grateful to have grown up here, and that really grounded us throughout all of our college years, our time on the East Coast. But for us, I mean, not only is Toledo home, but it was also a place of opportunity, right? A place to make an impact.
The idea, I guess, the genesis of this, and I told you guys, I heard about you years ago. Keith Burwell from the Greater Toledo Community Foundation said, we've got this crew coming in from the East Coast, coming back home to do some very important work. So I guess, Samuel, where are we at this point with the Midstory and telling it? And how do you go about selecting what stories you're telling because of the importance you find in them?
Yeah, absolutely. Over the last 4 or 5 years that we've been, present in this community, it's just been a gratifying journey for us to be here. When we first came in, all four of us with different disciplines and backgrounds really wanted to find a way to mesh, our, interests and our skills together. And, what better way than to storytell for this region, realizing a lot of my friends, still to this day ask me why I returned back to the Midwest, specifically Toledo, Ohio, of all places. I always tell them that for me, it's my home. It's what got me out there in the first place, and I do owe this community, a voice. I think so many people, especially across, on the coast where larger urban populations are, don't really regard the Midwest. They only see, maybe country, corn. There's a lot of stereotypes that are out there, But for us, it's how do we challenge those stereotypes? How do we change those perceptions?
Yeah.
And it's not always the rosy pictures. I think we talk a lot about the challenges of growing cities across the Midwest and what we can do to progress these communities forward. So a lot of our content is data-driven, and we've been really getting more into that realm of data analysis. How do we tell a story? How do we present an accurate picture so that our community can move together collectively?
Walk people through, if they haven't logged on yet, once again, midstory.org is where they find all of this information, and you guys specifically, but walk people through what they're going to find. If they log on, what are they going to see? What are you building? How are you building it in order for them to learn?
Well, we have content across the board. So our primary, I would say, boundaries in terms of what we cover are in some ways geographic. I mean, we're looking at the Midwest as a region, whether you define that socially or geographically or culturally. And Toledo is sort of the perfect example of that. It's a mid-sized Midwestern city dealing with a lot of issues related to the post-industrial era. So we look at economics, arts and culture, a lot of data-driven work, education, social issues, and tackling those with a sort of solutions-oriented mindset. So as a nonprofit, of course, we are, in some ways, yes, a journalistic entity, but we also have a mission. And so all of our content is informed by that mission. And you'll find stories about everything from literacy to algal blooms to arts projects, you know, sort of across the board. But everything is thoroughly researched by, you know, a team of researchers. We have lovely data staff who are working on data-driven stories. All the graphics, all the content is original, so lots of artwork and design, and sort of that multimedia, interdisciplinary perspective that Sam was also referencing earlier.
We're looking at a couple of examples. Urban heat, you're talking about that, the interactive maps that you guys incorporate onto that site. From concept to delivery, what is the turnaround time? Because obviously I think people will listen, they'll be like, well, what makes them different than an online newspaper, an online magazine?
Sure. No, that's a great question. I mean, and it widely varies. We have stories that maybe have a couple of week turnarounds if they're primarily written, but we also have projects that take up to 2 or 3 years. And those are mini documentaries, interactive work that take original web design, coding, you know, data research, a whole team and effort. So it really does vary. And that length of time that it takes to put that together really makes the product that you see, which is something that is balanced, developed, well-researched, reliable, and engaging, right?
So the elephant in the room for a lot of people watching is you have 2 individuals sitting here, Ivy League educations. You're speaking to the fact that you probably go on to very lucrative careers after those educations. How do you keep this thing going? Because obviously money drives everything. How do you keep this going? How do you do your work, get it done, and keep it?
Yeah, we certainly need to keep the public interested in what we're doing and in our content. I think a lot of our content is supported by project-based grants. That's been something over the years, specifically during the pandemic, we've really grown in that specific area. But as we continue moving on, a lot of our, a lot of our content is supported by patrons, people that are interested in the kind of media that we produce. And more as those projects are rolling in, people are interested in telling a specific story. They want more, interesting and interactive multimedia to come out from those kind of topic matters. So,
did Greater Toledo Community Foundation get this thing going from the get-go?
Yeah, I think.
Or help too? They
were fantastic. The foundation has done an amazing job. In fact, we're actually working on a project with GTCF and the 50th anniversary called For Toledo, and we're kind of delving into 4 specific areas that they're interested in and being able to tell those stories. So
So as you go through this website, folks, and as you once again log on to midstory.org, you're going to find so much information, things that you won't get in the minute 30 stories that we put on air, the 15-second sound bites. I want to talk to them more on the other side. So stay right there. When we come back, we're going to talk a little bit more about who is maybe ringing their phone, asking them for some of this information that they have, or maybe it's not happening and should. We'll be right back right after this. Welcome back. Once again, glad to have with me both Samuel Chang and Logan Sander. They are the co-founders of Midstory. Midstory.org is where you go to find all of the information, this interactive website, storytelling that exists for not only the Midwest, but focusing a lot on the Toledo area. Logan, I asked you guys in the break, and I was talking more about who's making the call as far as city leaders, county leaders, state leaders, because you guys, I don't know if you realize it, and I'm going to pat you on the back quite a bit. This is an attaboy moment for you guys, but you're doing a lot of work to find out a lot of vital information about our communities, public health, education. You just go down the board, you name some of those categories that are important to you, but why are there no calls coming to you from, and this is rhetorical maybe, but are you guys calling county commissioners? Are you calling city leaders and saying, hey, you might want to listen, you might want to check this out?
Well, I would say we view
Or is
ourselves.
that too bold of a step?
I don't know if it's too bold of a step, but I think we really view ourselves as a public resource. And so for us, I mean, when we started Midstory, I think our first thought, of course, Sam comes from a policy background, and I from journalism. So the idea really was to mesh that together. And when we talk about, for example, a think tank, the idea is that all of the exciting thought and energy and ideation and creation and research gets funneled into political campaigns. And for us, I think the idea was we wanted to be a public entity. We wanted to be a resource. We wanted everyday people to be able to engage with these kinds of issues, which oftentimes can be siloed otherwise.
But I feel like there should be those moments, and you know, we're going to talk a little bit more with some guests on the other side who agree with me that sometimes we don't have enough people around Northwest Ohio pounding on their chests saying, I did some good work here. I'm not quoting Midstory in our evening news. Maybe I should be. Have you thought to that effect of maybe start turning out press releases for what you guys are turning out?
Yeah, absolutely. I think as in terms of our structure of the organization gets into I think as we build on our team and our culture here, we certainly want to be kind of a I don't want to say like a forecaster of what's to come in some ways. So providing the data, the initiatives, the programs, and what is behind the community, and being able to be part of those decisions certainly are things that we'd be interested in doing. But I think what Logan is saying, the research end, how do we make something like research, which seems very abstract, more consumable? I think that certainly is the educational part of our mission.
Yeah.
I think eventually, absolutely, we would love to be part of those, those conversations to see, how our research and the data that we're, stories that we're telling are influencing this community.
As I was looking through some of your interactive maps that you have put on the website, in fact, some of those out there who may be of my generation, but choose your own adventure books were kind of the mindset I thought as I was looking through that. And I'm like, wow, they really make this a fun learning experience as you're on there. So tell me, both of you, one story, one fact, one data sample that has really shocked you, because there are hundreds of articles that you can go through on midstory.org, but what was one thing that you dove into and then you were like, wow, I didn't realize I was going to find this?
Well, I think the most recent, one of the most recent projects we were working on, and actually this was in partnership with the Community Foundation, we were taking a look at literacy across Northwest Ohio. We got the sort of privilege to interview a number of individuals who are working in that sector, and also an individual in his 60s who just learned to read last year. And that interview was incredibly moving. I think hearing that story, the ways it's changed his life. But throughout that project, we've also delved into how literacy rates intersect with things like race, socioeconomic status, access even to food, right, to food insecurity issues. And so when we look at that kind of data and you see it on a map, right, and you see those overlapping areas, I think that's really powerful as a visual, but also accompanied with that human aspect, the human narrative of there are real people on the ground that are facing these kinds of things, which sometimes we're not exposed to that in our day-to-day life.
Samuel, we've got about a minute left. How about for you? What surprised you?
Yeah, I think in terms of the projects that we're currently working on, certainly something that's very close to me is our Asian in Ohio project. We're documenting stories across Ohio of Asian and Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders and their voices. And I think just hearing from them, the adversity that they had to deal with and how they were able to overcome those challenges. I myself, an immigrant to this country, moved here when I was 5, and certainly share some of those similar narratives. And to hear those stories, and for us to be able to showcase those stories that are not necessarily drowned out by maybe East Coast and West Coast narratives, but to share Asian American voices in the Midwest. That to me has been extremely powerful.
I know you guys and your crew have been within the fabric of Northwest Ohio, Southeastern Michigan, and the Midwest for some time now. However, I hope that we can start ringing the bell a little bit louder for you guys and the work that you're doing. I really appreciate you spending some time with us.
Yeah.
We appreciate that.
Thanks so much.
Thank you
Absolutely.
so much.
Once again, if you want to check out some of the insight that they have provided, go to midstory.org, and we will continue to talk about them and their story on the other side with Bill Horman and Gary Byers right after this. Last couple of weeks here on Leading Edge, we've been bringing together some of my friends over the years and talking about not only our topics of the day, but our topics right here on Leading Edge. Want to reintroduce to you Gary Byers, former judge, Lucas County Commissioner, and also Bill Horman, friend of WTOL, WTVG, and me over the years. Good to see you.
Yeah, been here quite a while. Good. Thanks for calling us in, Jeff. This was a terrific segment to discuss.
You know what? When you and I were on the phone, I'll start with you, Bill. You were talking about you look for those opportunities to tell the good, right? I mean,
Right.
There's so much negative in the news, but what's happening here? You have looked at their website, you have looked at their storytelling. Your thoughts?
It's absolutely remarkable. What they're doing, I think, is threading between the way newspapers have gone online and even incorporated video to what you and I did as TV broadcasters, producing video content. Now they're doing podcasts and blogs and the rest of it, but they're able to spend some time on topics that we couldn't shove into a minute and 15, a minute and 30 seconds.
Right.
And they can invest the time, and they've really done this very nicely. It's well produced, the video content, the blogs, the podcasts.
Gary, talk a little bit about, from your perspective, and we talked about this in the second segment with them, with both Samuel and Logan. We said, why aren't you being called about your insight? And how do you guys, as Lucas County Commissioners, City of Toledo Mayor, right? Former. I'm sorry, but you know the inside play, and do you seek out information like this?
Well, first of all, there are two aspects. The first one is I think it's great. I have so many friends that have had kids that have grown up here, moved off to college, and never came back.
The brain drain.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. And the fact that they have come back in such a dynamic way, I think is something that they should be proud of and that we should be proud of. And we're seeing it more and more among my friends that they are having kids that are recognizing our community as a growing, vibrant place that it is. And that's a positive. I think this is something that government is made of individuals, people that want to help the community. And the stories that they tell on Midstory are stories that will affect the community. I think elected officials can be a resource that they can utilize in a way to mold into the format that they want to give to the public. The issues that they want to deal with are issues that elected officials deal with every day. And there's no reason that they should not combine.
You know, one of the things, Bill, they were mentioning to me off camera, they said they've got students from Northwestern, students from other schools who do not have roots here in Northwest Ohio, who are actually coming in to work. Did you guys say they were interns, more or less? More or less for the summer. There's some of that great TV
right?
work talking off camera, but they said this operation is growing. They've got a stable of writers who come in and help them with all of this.
You don't want to mix politics with this, but the East Coast and the West Coast are different from the Midwest. And I think a lot of kids who perhaps are schooled on the East Coast, like I was, see the Midwest as something maybe a little slower, maybe a little less expensive, maybe a little better in quality of life. And I wouldn't be surprised if some of the folks who have come here decide this is more my style than, say, a Los Angeles or a Denver or Washington or Boston would be. The Midwest is a terrific area, and we have a vast economy. We have cultural opportunities, education. It is all here. You just need to realize it's here and be willing to accept that.
Right, and dealing in real estate as you are now, and I mean, you see this each and every day. Gary, how tough is it to tell the good? Let me ask this. You and I had a conversation. Let me ask this. You and I had a conversation before you came out here. You said, I don't think there's enough of people banging their chests and pounding their chests saying, we're doing good work.
Yeah.
Why is that so tough for Toledo?
For the last couple years, I've had this gnawing belief that the commodity of the 21st century is fresh water.
Yeah.
And because of that, I see places like Cleveland, Toledo, Detroit, they are going to be in high demand. And what we've already done to make our community welcoming, the metro parks, the museum, the zoo, the lake, everything, the cost of living. These are things that we should be bragging about, bringing people into our downtown, because it is a community now, and it is a vibrant community, and people that grew up here and maybe moved away do not appreciate that. And again, I commend them for coming back and taking that jump, and that others, if they tell the story, others will come. If you build it, they will come. Well, if you tell the story, they will come too. And we need to be more bold in sharing that story around the country.
But what about the leap of faith these young people are taking to do what they're doing?
I applaud it. It's something that, you know, I've been in Toledo for 45 years, and so I feel that, but I still was transplanted here. The people that love Toledo the most and appreciate how great a place this is are the ones that came from somewhere else.
It's definitely true.
And I think that we should celebrate that, and the fact that they left and came back, I applaud them, and I think they're ahead of the tide. I think the wave is coming, and I think they're going to be part of the storytelling that generates that wave of people coming back to the Midwest.
Bill, final word, 30 seconds. Just you seeing the youth come back and make sure that the story that's being told is a good one.
Well, they're telling stories that need to be told. They're telling stories that need solutions. But they're not telling those stories in a deep, dark way. They're telling them in an optimistic, futuristic way. And I really, really appreciate that, because that's what we need, the optimism. We need to know that we're in a great community that has some weak points that we just need to, you know, buttress a bit. And some of their stories have nothing to do with the future or problems. They're just history of Toledo, and that's fascinating as well. Get in touch with your roots, and you'll be more deeply rooted.
Gentlemen, great to see you.
Always a
Again,
pleasure.
as always, we appreciate the insight. Stay right there. We will wrap things up for this week right after this. Welcome back for a final time here on Leading Edge. I encourage you to check out midstory.org. There are stories about city infrastructure, public health, education, and insight surrounding the culture of the Midwest. Thank you so much for joining us. If you missed any part of our interview, check it out on our YouTube page. Have a good week.